They're cowards. They're gonna walk up to armed Russian soldiers of supposedly the second most powerful military in the world and stab their soldiers to death, but they're cowards. Listen to how he talks about these residents with disdain, and then he asks, why do they hate us so? No matter what we offer them, no matter how we bribe them, no matter what we say to them, they will not reject their Ukraineness to become Russian. This is a very interesting document here, because we all know that partisan activity are very, 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 very active in the Kherson region. It's more active in the Kherson Oblast than in any other part of the country. A lot of active resistance against the Russians there, a lot of somewhat organized resistance, and a lot of disdain for the Russian occupiers. And one of the Russian occupiers actually wrote about this in the temporarily occupied Kherson Oblast. And this is somebody who actually fought for the neo-Nazi group, Rusich. He is like a Rusich soldier. It was shared on the Rusich Telegram. For those of you who don't know, Rusich is like a Russian neo-Nazi militia, and they are also fighting in the war in Ukraine. So again, neo-Nazis denazifying Kherson is very interesting. So in this post, he talks about a lot of things. He talks about how locals treat them, how the occupation is going, and how he thinks if the trend continues, they're doomed to lose the war. Let's read. It is difficult to put together all the thoughts and impressions of Kherson. In a military sense, everything is fine there. The VDV at the front are working as they should. They have enough equipment and everything they need. This is a few days after the counteroffensive started. When compared with the impoverished army of the Donetsk direction, an order and discipline reign along the entire front line. Any issue is resolved according to the rules, but very quickly because communication has been established and each military man has a clear understanding of his rights and obligations, which nullifies the watchman syndrome. In the city of Kherson itself, you feel like an English officer in the newly captured India. Local residents consider us occupiers, although, unfortunately, we do not show any signs of occupation, but I think it would be worth it. So what he's saying here, by the way, him saying that like everything's fine and great on the front is not really true. It's only gotten worse since this post was made, but definitely since they have like no air control over that. But here, he says that they feel like an English officer in India, that they view them like occupiers. And he's like, but we're not occupiers, but we should be. So he's saying that, God damn it, I wish we were more like the English in India, because they view us like the English in India, so might as well act like the English in India so we can get more benefits out of the occupation. Dylan Burns will personally lead the IRA to Irish unity. Amen. Is there like an FSA fan cam? That would be based, actually. We should make an FSA fan cam. The local population on the streets mostly thumps and begs. Beggars in Kherson are not only homeless people and marginal alcoholics living on the streets, but also completely ordinary people. Middle-class kids find it normal to walk up and ask a passerby for ice cream. The locals lack courtesy and a culture of communication. They simply ask give without using the word please. The contempt for locals here is beyond belief. At the same time, there are employment centers in Kherson. There's enough work, but people simply do not want to do anything. Russia's position is to pay pensions in rubles, to give benefits and all sorts of bonuses. But unfortunately, this does not in any way stimulate the recovery of the region's economy. Instead, we just feed the freeloaders who think they are owed everything. Can you like listen to this? Like, listen how much disdain he has for like public. He's like, look at these fucking beggars and alcoholics. These dumb kids who just want everything handed to them. They were invaded. Their economy was hollowed out. There's a reason they're begging. It's because of you, you massive cunt. In Kherson, there is water, gas, electricity, communications, and almost complete security. No. The shops have absolutely all the goods for the assortment of Russian supermarkets. Medicine, with the advent of Russia, became free. Medicine is not free, by the way. This is just not true. Russian pensions are almost 4 times higher than Ukrainian ones. How do Kherson crests react to this? Hatred. Undisguised public hatred. So what this doesn't mention is how like jobs, and this is the same reason why there's so many people begging, which he has disdain for, have like largely collapsed. The job sector there, the economy there, the ability for people to make money has largely collapsed. And so even if Russian pensions are larger, right? Even if we were to make that argument, the amount of money the average person in Kherson has now is less than what they had before, because before they could also rely on the income they got for work. In the early morning of August 24th, I was drinking coffee in the square and heard the janitor shouting, "Alina Masha, happy holiday." The locals are not shy of calling people in camouflage or Z-shirts fucking orcs. And that's so fucking based. In the supermarket, in response to my phrase, "I beg your pardon," I asked to let me through the window. A local sow with a kohol child. This is again a slur for Ukrainians. He's like, why do they hate us so much? These fucking dirty Ukrainians. Why do they hate us? Like, if you're calling them slurs and you're actively like attacking them and calling them dirty beggars after you hollowed out their economy, it's not that surprising that they don't like the occupation. This would be like George. This would be like a Confederate general. Like, why do these black people hate us? And then he just like throws off 20 slurs. Like, oh, I wonder why. I wonder why they don't like you. Responds with a haughty look at the camouflage in the phrase, "Yes, beg for forgiveness." The impunity of such behavior is the cornerstone problem of Kherson's integration. By the way, the integration of Kherson has been put on hold. They were going to have like a vote to see if Kherson becomes part of the Russian Federation, and due to the Ukrainian counteroffensive, they've put that on hold. Kherson, again, another slur for Ukrainian, are cowardly, so they don't take any special actions, mainly fighting with the help of Ukrainian graffiti and whining on social networks. But there are enough sabotage groups in the city, and every week they blow up the cars of Russians. We have to remove reg plates from our cars and check underneath it every hour. Walking in the city alone is strictly not recommended. The reason why is they'll stab you to death, the partisans. An open pro-Russian stance in Kherson today either requires real courage or desperate recklessness. Most of the people who support Russia simply do not express their views in public, fearing censor or violence from their fellow countrymen. I wonder why. By the way, it's weird for him at one sentence to say, "These people are cowards. By the way, I'm terrified. They're going to stab me if I walk alone, and they're going to put a bomb under my car, and they're going to kill me. They're going to kill me and all my friends." But they're cowards. They're cowards. They're going to walk up to armed Russian soldiers of supposedly the second most powerful military in the world and stab their soldiers to death, but they're cowards. All the agitation in the city is trying to please the Ukrainians. People in, I do not know how to pronounce this, flaunt on the banners. They are promised various benefits and handouts by joining Russia, but this does not in any way motivate them to join Russia. Their Ukrainianness is irrational and not a sober logical choice. The 8-year zombification of the Ukrainian population is bearing fruit. People simply do not turn on their minds because they were constantly warned from rational thinking with the help of violence. This is a topic for a separate study, but examples of such psychological aberration are seen everywhere. For the first time in 6 months of the war, an old woman from the front line received a huge Russian pension by her standards, and the first thing she asked us was how to exchange it for hryvnias. Hryvnias being the local Ukrainian currency. Although you can't really buy things in her district for hryvnia, it's unprofitable. However, the hryvnia is still in use, and in the big city, it has not yet been possible to get rid of it. In Kherson, a single hryvnia exchanges for the rate of 1.5 ruble, but it has not been respected by almost any cafe or restaurant. They all work in their own way. This could easily be fixed in a day or two, but the local authorities just shrug their shoulders and dine in the same cafes, overpaying 1 or a half to. I like that they charge the Russian soldiers more. That's great. So the temporary authorities are attempting to appeal to locals by using Ukrainian symbols while suggesting life in Russia would be better. We agree this is a failure of propaganda. All this happens to the accompaniment of street musicians performing the Song of Ukraine from Eurovision 2022. At the moment, our policy in Kherson is a failure, and it will result in the loss of the city for us if we do not stop chewing snot and do not introduce a number of measures. Listen to like all of this, man. Like, again, this is from a Russian neo-Nazi, right? This was posted on a Russian neo-Nazi Telegram. So like the most pro-Russian like fascists in Ukraine are saying like, look, we are going to lose the city if we don't go hard. Again, I don't think any of the go hard options that he's proposing is going to lead to them keeping the city. But like, listen to how he talks about these residents with disdain. And then he asks, why do they hate us so? No matter what we offer them, no matter how we bribe them, no matter what we say to them, they will not reject their Ukraineness to become Russian. Which just shows how determined the population of Kherson is to stay Ukrainian. It is also part of the reason why I think it's inevitable that it gets taken back. Does anybody have a link for this article? Sure, I'll link it in chat. I'll link it in first. I'll link it in site chat because it's more based. Dylan, can you link this? I really need to. Sure, let me send it over to you. God, if there's anything I love, it's coping and seething Russian neo-Nazis. So here is his proposed solutions so they don't lose the city, because he thinks they're going to lose the city currently. All Ukrainian de-Russification laws, quotas for music on the radio, language bans, quotas for books, laws on education, should be enacted in the opposite direction. These people were beaten with sticks for 8 years and imprisoned for the tricolor on the glass of a car. If someone thinks that that after that they can be Russified back without violence with the help of persuasion, he is a moron, nullifying all the achievements of the special military operation. So the first thing he wants to propose to win over the local population is to make a quota for Russian music. So that basically saying that like you must play this much Russian music during the day, that they ban the Ukrainian language. They put a quota on how many books need to be in Russian. Laws on educating, making sure they just teach Russian in the schools, and more. Now, the thing is, I've talked about before how the Russians kind of, the Russian government has a history of Russification in Ukraine. And this is the same reason why so many people here in Kharkiv, including my host here, speak Russian and not Ukrainian, even though they identify with Ukraine. It's the same reason why the Irish speak English and they don't really speak the ancestral Irish language. It's due to the fact that it was forced upon them. Under the Russian Empire, the Ukrainian language was banned, just straight up banned. And taking that into consideration, it's not that crazy that there's so many Russian speakers in Ukraine. The Russians like to kind of forget the fact that the Russian language, not like all Russians, but the Russian government, that the Ukrainian language was banned in Ukraine. But that did have an effect on the amount of Russian speakers that are in Ukraine, because many of the people who, were like Ukrainian scholars had to flee to the Austro-Hungarian Empire so they could write in Ukrainian and they could speak in Ukrainian. That's the first thing. And so I would like to say that this feels almost like a continuation of that policy, like in wanting to bring back that historical Russian policy of the suppression of the Ukrainian language. Who wrote this? This was written by a Russian soldier in the Rusich neo-Nazi militia, which is currently in occupied Kherson. And he's like, degrading the local Ukrainians. So this was written by a Russian neo-Nazi soldier. Okay, next one. The hryvnia should be withdrawn from circulation and banned. The remaining hryvnia must be exchanged at a rate of 1-to-1 and burned, as was done in Donetsk. Serious criminal liability should be introduced for setting one's own course, which differs from the official one. All of this is going to, all of these policies are going to do one and one thing only. All it's going to lead to is more assassinations of Russian soldiers from locals, more bombings, more killings. Like we have like on Russian state media talking about, like, maybe we need to acknowledge the existence of Ukraine, the Ukrainian nation, and then you go to these policies being introduced. If you introduce these policies in Kherson, the one lesson Russia should have learned by now is you cannot beat Ukraine into submission through brutality and suppression. That it just doesn't work. They tried that in Kharkiv. They tried it in Mariupol, and the only reason that it worked in Mariupol was because Mariupol was cut off, not because they got so brutal. I mean, look how long Mariupol held out. And so getting this brutal is only going to build more resistance among the local population and lead to more people joining the resistance. The Nazis tried to, you know, brutalize the population of Yugoslavia, and all that did was send more people into Joseph Broz Tito's army. Like, this is not going to have the effect he thinks it's going to have. Public Ukrainian propaganda, graffiti slogans, or statements should be criminalized. Destruction of terrorists and saboteurs should be widely covered in the press. These measures are not bloodthirsty. They do not even half correspond to the measures that the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian society has introduced in the occupied territories of historical Russia. Oh yeah, buddy, okay. This is simply a necessity. If you decide to return to your lands, then there will be no order without a hard hand. So basically he's advocating for a harder approach. So on one hand, he's saying that the locals hate them as he throws slurs at them, and that they're going to lose the city unless they implement these policies. And I can tell you, none of these policies are going to stop the advance of the Ukrainian army. And all these policies would do is probably make the local Ukrainians resist more and try to sabotage the Russian army more as the occupation gets worse and worse, as the situation gets worse and worse for the occupiers. So much of this reminds me of what the Brits occupying Northern Ireland think. Yeah. I mean, it seems that there seems to be like a trend with occupation. They absolutely do want to revive those policies. Yeah, they do. We need more opportunities to use that stabby peepo emote. It's a good emote. The difference between you and me is that I can say that and you can't because you're a brainless ideologue. Not you, Dylan? Oh, wow. Why are you bullying me? How dare you bully me, chat? Chat once again attacks me. Attacks me for me speaking the truth. Truth to power, in fact.